Thanks to Windows on the World.
Bringing you cutting-edge news, empowering information, and no conspiracy theories on tonight's show. Nils-Axel Morner was born in 1938. He has a PhD in geology, which he gained in 1969. He is the former head of the Paleogeophysics and Geodynamics Department at Stockholm University. He was president of the International Union for Quaternary Research and the Commission on Neotectonics, 1981 to 1989. He has 547 peer-reviewed papers, mostly on sea level, spanning over 40 years. He headed the INTAS, International Association for the Promotion of Cooperation with Scientists from the new independent states of the former Soviet Union project on geomagnetism and climate, 1997 to 2003. He is a critic of the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the notion that the global sea level is rising dangerously or accelerating. He was at the PCC Challenge and made several presentations there, which can be found on the websites given already. That's windowsontheworld.net, pcc15.org, and 1000 Frolly on YouTube. He is also one of the founders of the Committee on Geo Ethics. Nils-Axel Morner, welcome to Windows on the World.
Thank you.
So we met at the alternative to the COP21 in Paris, and you gave a lecture there along with many other scientists and very informed people. For anyone out there who's not heard of your work, can you just give us just a brief background of your scientific background and how you got into this subject of anthropological global warming?
Okay. My name is Nils-Axel Morner. Most people call me Niklas. I'm a geologist and geophysicist, and I had my own institute at Stockholm University on paleogeophysics and geodynamics, and had lots of students, and so I have written by over 600 scientific papers and lots of books. So I have a solid background. I'm a specialist in the sea. I mean, usually I say at least I know one beats me in that subject. Climate is also another subject. When I was exposed to the IPCC concept, first on sea level, then general on climate, I was, so to say, shocked that it didn't fit with observational facts and physical laws. And this is the fundament where we cannot allow divergent from facts and laws in science. So there must be something basically wrong. And then one note in this IPCC project and all those proponents which gathered in Paris and had their agreement. There's very clever and good people. How could it be that such an in some way excellent group of people get such a completely wrong issue which they fight for? There are very many ways of looking upon it, but one way is this religious. It took over like a wildfire, and people didn't any longer consider facts, but had hanged on to this scenario-based idea. And therefore, I had to work on it and see on different ways. We created a special international group for Geo Ethics, because it's also ethical aspect on this. You are not allowed to claim things which are not founded in science and physical laws if you are a scientist. And that's what I am and my friends are, and that's what we have to fight for. Yes.
Absolutely. This paper that you've just written, The New Religion of Global Warming, Its Misconceptions in Science, is really aimed at these IPCC summary reports and the way that this has turned into a religion based on a consensus which isn't actually true. For people who may not believe that, can you just give a bit of a background of how the IPCC got into this and where things started to change? Because initially there was more real scientific evidence presented, but as it's gone on, the summary papers that they produce have become more and more exaggerated. Can you just go into that and why that happened?
Okay, that's partly a long story, but we make it short.
Yeah.
First of all, we had a period of little ice ages. And this period of little ice age ended about 1850. And from that time on, we had a general warming. That warming, even the IPCC understand that is primarily driven by the sun. Then something happened after the war when we started to burn a lot of fossil fuel for electricity, for heating, for cars and so on. And from 1950 on, they claimed that the CO2, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, is the main driver of climate change. And if we go back, and that is what the paper also is about, so we say, okay, in the last 55 years, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere increased by 80 ppm. That's how they measure carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It's just very, very, very tiny part, but still it's there, and it's an increase about 80. During the same time, whether from carbon dioxide or from the sun, we shouldn't start with saying they start, but temperature of the globe rose about half a degree Celsius, so 0.5 degrees Celsius, uncertainty of about 0.1. So in the next 55 years, in the next 80 ppm, it would rise if it was carbon dioxide driven. And now we enter into a physical law that this is what we call in science logarithmic. The next increase is just half of the previous one, and so on. So the next 80 ppm step and in 55 years would be not 0.5 but 0.25, half of the first one, and the third one would be half of the second one. So, and if we add them up, and then we are about 2,100 or just after, the total possible amount of temperature rise from CO2 would be 0.875. And that is completely different from what they say in IPCC. They are talking about 2.7 and 2. And I will come back why they are doing so. We know that this rise in the last 55 years cannot have been 100% CO2 driven. The most it can be, the absolute most it could be is 50%, probably much less, 25% or something, or even nothing. But the primary driver is the sun, because the sun oscillates in different periods. And we know that in the first part, though carbon dioxide was all the time rising, temperature was stable, rising rapidly and stable. So it was a negative correlation, a positive correlation, and a negative correlation. That means that it cannot be driven in a linear and 100%, which IPCC has based all of its ideas on. So the basic thing is wrong. And then there is another thing. If the sun, I'm a believer, and we have been doing, lots of people have been working on the solar variability. And the solar variability goes in short period and in longer periods. And the longer periods with the decadal change. In the last millennium, they always caused little ice ages when we had a longer low in the solar activity. And from the cyclicity and from the different ways of calculating, all of us end up by year 2030, 2040, 50, there will be a big solar law. So instead of rising temperature, we have falling temperature. And that is also bad. But now we come to the second thing, how the two groups calculate things. IPCC, they go into models based on this false assumption that it's a linear relationship between carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and temperature. And all those 102 models, they give a mean by year 2100 of a temperature rise of plus 2.7 degrees Celsius. That was all the debate in Copenhagen. Then there is a span, of course, in these models, but they range about like 2 to 3.4 degrees. So they had to go less than 2 degrees, and then they ended less than 1.5 degrees. That is scenario, computer model analysis. If we go to the only thing which is reality, it's the measurements themselves. We have two ways of measuring temperature. We can measure them on the global surface itself, and we can measure it up in the atmosphere by balloons or satellites. Those two ways of calculating temperature, they correspond very well. From 1980 up to today, they have risen 0.3 degrees. 0.3 degrees. That's very little. And in the last 20 years, stable to even lowering a little if you go to the atmospheric measurements. So and that is the observation. And how could you discard those? How could you go from them? Because we, on my side, those of us we call us climate realists, because we look at the reality as documented in nature, as measured by instrument and following the physical law. So by 2100, there's no way that temperature could go above 1 degree, probably much lower. And if there is any CO2 effect in it, we are talking about like at the most 0.3 degree, which is nothing and pose no problems whatsoever. And that's the main message. And of course, if you convert that into the sea level story, which is my speciality, there is no way that sea level could rise by 1 meter or more. This is against physical laws. It's against everything we know in science. So the more correct thing, which cope with what we observe and have observed through a long period of time by instruments, by all kind of different measurement, including people just remembering what she was at their childhood and today. All this way gives a possibility by 2001 of 5 centimeter with an uncertainty of 15 centimeter on both sides. So maybe 20 centimeter to minus 20 centimeter. And that is the sea level source. So no threat, no problems at all. And this is the base for this pyramid. So they have grown, the idea of IPCC have gone with a wildfire type of into some sort of new religion, a substitute from previous religion. And it is not founded in facts. It's misconception in scientific. That was the main message. Yes.
Indeed, and we're going to get on to the Committee for Geo Ethics, which you've set up very soon. But this is very interesting how global warming became climate change, because there's been no actual warming for, I think it's about 18 years now. Yes. So it's now changed to global warming. But the actual political reasons for this and what the UN are trying to impose, which is a world government and a taxation system which is going to impoverish the very poorest people on the planet. So the whole thing of this fake environmentalism is actually really going to affect the poorest people on the planet, and it's going to give the elites immunity from all this carbon dioxide reduction nonsense. They're basically just going to carry on with carbon trading and all the rest of it. So this has been put in place really as a business, and I think that's very, very important, that people don't realise that this is not really about true environmentalism. It's about control, and I go into this quite a lot with the policies of Agenda 21 or Agenda 2030 as it's now been rebranded. And I see the implementation of these policies at local level, because all of this is coming through local councils, through ICLEI, which is basically local councils for sustainable development. Every area in the United Kingdom and most parts of the world, I mean, America mirrors us pretty well, and I'm sure it's the same in Sweden. All these policies are built in to local governance, and they're affecting people on a local level, and that's, I think, where we can get more people on board with this, when they realise that their liberties, their human rights are being taken away under Agenda 21. So I think it'd be a good time now to go into the Committee on Geo Ethics, which you've set up to try and get some balance back into science. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. First, a few things of this general thing. Of course, someone said that the UN needed something which they could agree upon. They badly need to show agreement. And then they took an innocent question which didn't mean anything, and that was climate. Because they should work on real problems in the real world. Wars. I mean, there's so many problems. People are, water is a great problem. I mean, it's 25% dies every day for not water. The distribution of food, medical aid, and of course now the resistant bacteria. There are so many big issues to consider, not even solar flare, which has come up as a very great threat in the future. But instead, and maybe just to escape from those problems, they go into this climate. Geoethics was set up in order to take care of the ethical issues in geoscience and planetary science and so on. So we don't allow people to neglect observational facts and physical laws. When they do that, and certainly the whole of IPCC is based on neglecting scientific observational fact and diverging from some of the physical laws. When they do so, they break, in normal wording, ethical laws, but we call it geoethical laws. And in that case, we are allowed, so to say, to take out the sword of truth and fight for what is scientific truth. Not what we believe in, we believe it, but it certainly is a scientific truth, because it's documented in the field. We can get back there anytime, and it is also based on the physical laws. So simple as that. And it goes back to the days of Darwin, when he discovered the evolution of species and so on. For example, for me, there are so many things which we can debate in ordinary life, pro and cons, and especially in religious, where everyone is allowed to believe in whatever he or she wants. It's up to us, but no state is allowed to tell which is the truth. That is a very great difference. But when it comes to evolution, this is one of the most well-established facts. But of course, we can always change small things, but it is there it is not created in one day 6,000 years ago, but it is created over billions of years, step by step, by this evolution effect. Those who deny that, so-called creationism, they speak against science. That is anti-science. And for me, those who speak about CO2-driven global warming, it's also anti-science. So they stay side by creationism. And that is what we as in Geo Ethics have to show and also say this is not how it should be. We have to find correct ways of understanding and driving it. Also to the respect of the real problems of the world, which is much, much more important than these degrees. This is just illusion. And if you go back to the ordinary day life, which has also, there's a part of these ethical things. Today, we have began to talk about reality and virtual reality. So, and now it's mixed. Attenborough, your excellent, really remarkable natural journalist, he's began speaking and showing and documenting global reality. But when he became old, he mixed it. So now he thinks reality is virtual reality and we cannot distinguish them. So for example, when we see a movie about dinosaurs moving, it's so excellently done, it's so perfect, but that is virtual reality. It has never happened by any animal like that. But if we see a movie from the animal life in East Africa or something, this beautiful movie, that is reality. This elephant or this just made that mark on the ground and did this. It is a documentation of what really have happened. And the virtual is just something which have cooked up. And that is the difference with what I'm trying to say now and what IPCC. They have come to live in some sort of illusion, and that is a virtual reality. And it is remarkable how it has taken over, and it's in some way understandable. I can drive the scientific part. There's no problem with that. But this understanding how, like a wildfire, it has taken over, no limits of it. That is very surprising. But it has to do with this virtual reality. All these people standing with the cell phones and what it is, they should observe. When they come out in the spring and first birds comes and the sounds and the smell, they should watch it, not having something in the ear, because we want to observe what really happens at that moment. And this is, the whole of geoscience is based on what we observe and then what we deduct. We don't go to model. Model this is just to make some averages or whatever it is. But when it takes over, and that is the end of true science. Yes.
That's very true. You brought up a very important point there of the way that news is presented and information is presented. This kind of idea of a virtual interpretation, it's actually a very good concept that you've just brought up there, but it does go into how this information is presented and people repeat it. So what we have is we have this stuff coming out of the BBC, and as you're saying, David Attenborough, who was making brilliant wildlife programs and still is, but he's been roped into this, and the other guy, David Bellamy, who opposes the anthropological global warming idea, has been pretty much cut out of television, and he speaks for the other camp now, or the other side. So I think it's interesting. The way it's presented to the public is that there are people who are right, who believe it, and there are people who are wrong, who don't. And anyone who's questioning this has these attacks and they get discredited. Like yourself, you've been attacked over this on the internet. But what happens is when you get the hang of how this works, you can see how it's all very shallow, and when these people are really put on the back foot and they have to debate this, they can't. But they've been given a few little sound bites, and this happens with the mainstream media, the BBC. They've all bought into it because it's a political agenda that's being enforced on us. So how do we get this out, Niels? Because you're doing remarkable work here within the scientific community. Now, this Committee for Geo Ethics can get things out to a wider audience, but how do we break down this mainstream media stranglehold that's putting forward this idea, which we know has been discredited? There was the ClimateGate scandal a few years ago. It's almost like this stuff gets brushed under the carpet. So have you got any ideas how the scientific community can fight back against this?
Yeah, we have it in this geoethic principle. It is also, there are limits what you are allowed to say. So for example, if measurements say that temperature can never rise more than a degree, or rather about half a degree by 2100. The models say 2.7 plus and minus 0.7. The models are not to be trusted. And if Jim Hansen, one of those great advocate for global, says that it may be even 5 to 7 degrees, just nonsense. That is nonsense. And we have to put him into a box, a hall of shame. And the same goes for those people in sea level. A few decimeters, maybe, but not 1 meter or more than one. That is out of possibility with respect to physical laws and scientific knowledge. So those who say 2-3 meters, also Hansen and others, it's nonsense. It's not correct. And we can only place them in a hall of shame. Then we come to some of the major journals, like Science, like Nature's, which have taken the stand for IPCC. And so to say, in honor to the United Nations. So, and they say, we don't accept anything which challenge the IPCC idea. That's completely out of scientific way of handling. They should be journalists. They should just see that they are good, excellent papers. And with time, the time tells you what is correct and wrong. If the journalists in those papers start to do the screening, that's not good. And this goes for your BBC. They have also gone the way of United Nations. We have most of the local newspapers in any country here. And the same goes for example, the funding in European Union. If you want to have a project on climate or anything related to climate, you have to promise that the end project should be in line with IPCC. All the others just not get any funding directly. So these things has to be changed because they are credit to anything which is called science. And I think the national academies, they must wake up because they are sleeping. They are thinking that this is not important. But the scientific academies, because they are supposed to fight for science, they must wake up. And that's very, very important.
With this agenda being enforced locally onto everybody, and it's starting to impact onto everybody's lives in certain boroughs in London, they're really working on banning cars completely and creating these sustainable development villages, high density housing. The other side of what's happening with this agenda is real enslavement of the population. So it's separating these two things is extremely important. So can you tell us a bit more about who else is involved with the Committee on Geoethics?
Well, we have taken a group of excellent people, of course, they share our opinion. You can put that on us, so that most of the people are, of course, at this stage are so-called climate realists. They don't accept it, and of course they shouldn't, because otherwise they are not good scientists in my way of seeing it, because we have to stick to observation and physical laws. Yes. So we have a group, only 12. We have no president, but we have an honorary president, and that is Charles Darwin. And then we have 12 scientists on equal level, which is a committee, steering committee. We have an advising board of some 28 persons, and then we have members, a lot of excellent members. And we began this organization in October. The interesting thing is that we put it as independent committee on geoethics. Independent, because this is a key word. All the others are dependent, and they are just saying what that is to tell them to say, and that's not good enough. It must be based on the real facts in the real world. Yes.
Well, exactly, and it was very refreshing to hear so many people putting forward real scientific data and analysis of this at the PCC 15 in Paris. But now with all these, every country's on board with it, this scientific consensus, and it's great that it's starting to be broken down. I would recommend that everybody look at this paper. Where can we find this paper, Niels?
Oh, it is in a journal called, just began, Kresk. And it's a journal on religious study, Buddhism and living. And it just started, and I thought this religious study, yes, it's really what I wanted to write a special paper on. And Buddhism, they're very wise. Buddhism, why? And living, this is our living conditions. And I already seen that several others are sending documents to the same journal, because maybe it's a interesting place to discuss this. We need to discuss this issue. Yes.
Yeah, and I think it should be more widely read. This is a very important opening statement that you make on the document as well, about the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change being launched in 1988 with the goal to verify a CO2-driven rise in global temperature and initiate restrictions so that the global atmospheric CO2 content was to become lowered. So it's very, very important that people know that.
Completely politically initiated. Yes. It was a meteorologist in Sweden which saw that maybe carbon dioxide is rising, temperature rose after the little ice age, and sea level had rose a little too. So he made an idea that they triggered each other. That was not a bad idea. It could be used, and we should discuss it, and we should see part of it works and part of it doesn't work. And of course we put in the sun. But then his best friend, which he played tennis twice a week with, was Olof Palme, our very charismatic prime minister. And he told them, no, we cannot make it a scientific project. We have to make it an intergovernmental panel of climate change. It was his idea, implanted on Brundtland. And Brundtland launched it, and when she did it, the whole project was already set up in Sweden. So it began, and it was all pre-arranged.
Yes, can you tell us a bit about Gro Brundtland, because she was very instrumental in getting all this going, and she is mentioned in an excellent video called Agenda 21 Explained by John Anthony, which you can find in an article on windowsontheworld.net called Big Society Change Agents, and I linked to some of these lectures on Agenda 21 so that people can see how it's being implemented in their local community. And this is not just some far off idea that may take hold. In America, for instance, these policies are brought in by executive order, They bypass Congress, and they're built into every local council in Britain. And it's like you were just saying, that the money and the investment structure is there for those who believe in the anthropological global warming idea presented by the IPCC, and that's very, very important. So this is not just an idea or a scientific idea, it's actually policy. So if you could just tell us a bit about Gro Brundtland, because, as I say, she was very instrumental in this.
Yeah, but of course she was prime minister in Norway, a social democrat like Palme. They worked together. And of course, as an outcome of this political thing, the Peace Prize is unfortunately given out by Norwegian government, not like the Nobel Prize, which is comes from Sweden. It is scientific committees, but there it's the government. So of course, as a follow-up on Brundtland's report, it was not so far-fetched that as some sort of applaud to her, an applaud to the project, they made this terrible choice of IPCC and Al Gore for the Peace Prize. I mean, that was a charade. It was complete nonsense. But that's one part. We end with that. But another thing is, for example, the European Union. They send their minister to the Pacific Island meeting and said, "Oh, we will support you we will make a bilateral negotiation. So we give you money," but they never told what the small island states were giving back to European Union. But what they are giving back are this scary story that we are being swapped out of the world from the rising sea level, like the president of Kiribati. And Kiribati is in no way being flooded by a rising sea level. If you go to the tide gauges measure sea level. There may be erosion, because in the coast there are always erosions and addition on another side. But what happened with the sea level itself, it's really no threat at all. So when he says that we are being flooded soon and we had to be relocated and so on. They said it earlier about the Maldives, and I worked very intensively in Maldives. Absolutely everything was just nonsense. It was not correct, but it was a way to getting money, and how the island paid back, it was by this scary story. So when these ministers from the European Union went there, she really asked, it's a way of bribing people, tell me this and you will get money. And the way of implanting that into a huge system is very much dishonest, and that's really not only geoethics, it's ethics, and of course the sword of truth must out, and we should of course not go into more than telling. We have our way of doing is telling and putting them in this hall of shame, because we have to create something like that. Yes.
Indeed, and you just mentioned Al Gore, and of course his film An Inconvenient Truth. It was found in court that there was 15 major errors in that film, but that film is still being shown, I believe, to school children, and this global warming and climate change is actually taught in schools as reality now. So we are really up against it. Yes, just in the final part of this interview, it'd be very good to go into your expertise in sea levels, because this is something we've touched on briefly, but I think it's your specialist subject in a way, isn't it? So it would be very good to get this out to people who have been told that sea levels are going to rise alarmingly, and it is covered in this paper. It would be very interesting in this last section to go into what you've found about world sea levels and compare that to what the IPCC are saying.
There is a nice diagram which I try to use. They have a lot of models, and all of the models goes up in the air, and they are based on nothing. If you go to observational facts, and so sea level has been oscillating up and down in the last 300 years at rates of about 1 millimeter per year, and that is 1 millimeter per year. That is 1 centimeter in 10 years, 1 decimeter, 10 centimeter in 100 years. That is the type of oscillation we are working with in the real world. But in their imagine virtual reality world, they talk about many tens of centimeter, and lots of people, as a matter of fact, even exaggerated to above a meter. And that is impossible. So when we had ice all down into England, down into northern Germany, down to New York in America at the last ice age, and it melted with an enormous rate of recession. The maximum sea level rise was a decimeter, a meter per 100 years. We can never ever beat it, because that was the time when ice was lying in northern mid-latitudes, and climate change as much came to 10,000 years, it came to the same values as today. So both from a theoretically and observational base, sea level is rising at centimeter basis, millimeter, centimeter, and in 100 years, not more than 10 centimeter basis. And that is where we can see, we have certain test areas where we can see it, like in Europe, Northern Europe. We know the uplift of Fennoscandia, the subsidence of Amsterdam. Amsterdam have been subsiding in 10,000 years, and the rate is 0.4 millimeter per year. And if sea level would have been going up at the rates that they are claiming, 3.1 millimeter per year, that would mean that Amsterdam, a subsidence area which all geologists knows, that would in fact go up by 2.7 millimeter per year. What is that? That is nonsense. And it's uneducated, total uneducation in geological disciplines. And the same goes from Scandinavia. We know, for example, Stockholm tide gauge area have gone up for 3,000 years at a rate of 4.9 millimeter per year. And then we see the measurements today. They are not at all in harmony what IPCC, but in total harmony with the observational fact. We can go to Maldives, for example, to Goa in India, where I have a fantastic record. In Bangladesh, where I have another fantastic. In the last 60 years, sea level has not risen in any way. It has been virtual stable, and so on. And then there comes some wise old men or women, and they say, well, this is interesting, because what you say totally agree with our observation. When I was a kid, I used to have my lunch at the flat stone right at the high tide. A man from New Zealand just wrote me. And he had measured, he went down and took catch fishes and or octopus, and there was a cave entrance, and he knew exactly what time of the day he was it was at his height and when he could enter, and so on. And today, 60 years later, it's the same level, and he takes his grandchildren there and do the same thing as did 60 years ago. So all these things are observational. That is the reality. And it's completely against what all this, now we have to use the word rubbish, which IPCC is fascinating art.
As far as these scare stories about Arctic ice and they're creating these disaster scenarios, can you just tell us a bit about that?
That is one of their means to get us down on the knees and subscribe to these ideas. And that is very, very unfair. But this is how it has become used. And of course, Al Gore's whole idea is to go with scaremongering. And he was the one who really put it out in the normal debate. And when some people said, yeah, but it's not really, you cannot really say so. They say, yes, because of the goal, I am allowed to exaggerate a little. And that brings you back to the goals the goal justifies the means. That was the Inquisition. You could do anything by people and put glowing irons into the body of people and so, because the goals justify the means. And that is terrible, and that's nothing. And that's why we in Geo Ethics say, no, this cannot work like this.
Yes, it's about controlling minds, and they're doing that quite successfully at the moment, even though there's plenty of dissent from people who are bringing logical, factual analysis to this. It's not even a debate, really. It's almost turned into a war. You're either for us or you're against us, you know. And it's a consensus reality, which many people have bought into. I come up against it all the time. And people are relying on this stuff they've heard. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, this virtual reality that's being created. It's very, very cleverly constructed, because people don't even realise that their minds are being controlled in this manner. And this has a lot to do with the way these simplistic ideas are presented on television, with pictures over them, with the polar ice melting. Even Al Gore with his Hollywood movie, with his special effects, you know, this stuff is still being put out there as though it's real. It's great the work you're doing, and this stuff on sea levels is remarkably important. So if people want to find more of your work, where would they find it?
Or ResearchGate. I have posted lots of my papers in ResearchGate. They can always mail me, because I am sending out lots of things to people. And I liked also the local people thinking and philosophizing, because that's which unify us. You know, some of my best, most entertaining discussions are by local people with just thinking, using their brain, and having their own ideas. This is so wonderful. Should never go and be slaves under the doctrines what other people are saying. Just always use your own brain. Try to figure out what you think is most could be the correct thing. I use it when I have lectures and so on. I had for 17 years I had courses, 1 week courses for the public here in Sweden, and it works very, very, very well. Because people are not stupid. People are clever, but they should just be accustomed to use this fantastic instrument they all have, the brain, and sort out in their own way. It doesn't matter.
Hopefully more and more people will start to do that. These policies have taken hold of everybody's lives, and they're implementing this stuff faster and faster. And it goes into loss of property rights, loss of private travel, and containment of population. And it has very sinister objectives. And this is what I find very disturbing about it, is that the people who are believing this, they're well-intentioned, but incredibly naive. And what you've just said, I think, sums it up, because if people can debate these things and talk about them, then this stuff can be kind of exposed and people will start thinking. But at the moment, what they've done is very cleverly, they've created a for and against. And if you're against, you're some kind of crank. It's just the way this stuff works. It's all PR.
Yeah.
It's all a public relations exercise.
Exactly. Yes.
So,
and that's the worry of our times, that we are in the hands of those very clever lobbyists, which can use any means. They don't care about the means. They use the shady means, they use the incorrect, they make the lies, doesn't matter, as soon as they achieve what they want. And that is so bad. And that is, against that we created the Geo Ethics, because we tried in our way, simple way, to work for ethical and geoethical principles, yes. And it has to be done. We must do it, everyone by themselves, wherever you are.
So just give us that website again, Niels.
It is geoethic.com.
So it's www.geoethic.com.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Well, that's great, Niels. Is there anything that you'd just like to say in conclusion? Because we're going to have you on again in a few weeks and talk about this other paper, which goes into natural and man-made disasters and mitigation. Because a lot of it does tie in really, because a lot of this consensus reality we're given is all about mitigation. It's about something that may happen in the future. And that's where models and projections come in. And I think you've done a very good job of putting some reality back into those models and projections today. So in conclusion, would you just like to sum up your ideas and what we can do to get this further out there? Because the real scientific community, I feel, has been very marginalised, and this is not getting into the public arena enough. So if you could say anything to the public out there about what to look for, how to empower themselves with some of this information, what would you suggest?
Yeah, first of all, of course, I'm the one who is driving observational facts, measurements. If temperature is rising, measured temperature in the atmosphere as well on the ground in the same way. This is what you should hang on to. You cannot go to models which say something which is 3 times as large as observed. That's not science. It's not correct. It's fooling. It's going into something which is in no way reality. We should observe that. We have to be decent in our argumentation. They cannot be allowed for these model lies and the setting aside of physical principle. When this is done, you disbehave with respect to geoscience and mass movements. I mean, it's so much of controlling instead of observing, debating. And the United Nations idea, endorsement of IPCC idea is of course terrible. 2 things. First of all, it killed the debate. Secondly, it steals the limelight from real problems in the real world. And maybe that is even why they are doing this, because this is a way of coming away from the real problems. And we need back to the real human and earth problems. Work against war. Be aware of nuclear accident. Work for the sharing of food in an equal way to the whole of the population. Do whatever you can to give proper water to the world. Medical aid is of course vital. And like resistant bacteria is coming out as something really vital, and we have to work for it. But now we forget it because we have something which is more important, and that is this IPCC. Note my wording, nonsense, because it's nonsense. So we're back in there. And for example, the environmental group, they are now being bought by IPCC, so they are completely quiet and work in their own way. And that's, of course, why Patrick Moore left. He was a founder of Greenpeace, and he left it because they have gone wrong. So there is much to be redone. We have to go back to the original wells, the original concept of decency, concept of ethics, which you call Geo Ethics. And for scientists, I mean, don't go to this crap science just to get funding for your research. Do the research precisely as is being observed. Now they don't do that because they have asked for the result before the project started, and that's wrong. We don't want this model virtual reality. We want back to Earth own reality.
Thanks very much, Nils-Axel Morner. That's great. And you brought up Patrick Moore there, and Patrick was speaking at the PCC 15, and you can find Patrick's videos on YouTube, and he's really done some good work. If you put Patrick Moore Greenpeace into YouTube, you will find Patrick's videos. We also had Piers Corbyn recently, Piers, brother of Jeremy, who has been working at weatheraction.com, and he supplies long-range weather forecasts which are more accurate than the Met Office. And he got onto the Andrew Neil show, which was during the actual conference. It was on the last day, I think, of the conference. He came back to London, was on the Andrew Neil show to present the other side of the consensus anthropological global warming idea, and he did a very good job. And that really proved that the mainstream media are just repeating. Andrew Neil was repeating exactly what he'd been told. He was trying to be extremely clever and trying to trip Piers up, but he didn't really have anything to back up what he was saying. And I think that's the thing. If we can get this into proper open debate, then it starts to fall apart. And hopefully more and more people are bringing it into the forefront like this, and it is happening. The problem we're up against is, as you're saying, the massive funding and the power of the United Nations. And people actually do still trust the UN. It's kind of understandable that people do that because of the front that they present. But when we see the tyranny that's actually behind this agenda and the control system that's been built around people's lives, if this really takes hold, which it is doing, the future of the human race is going to be under threat, because this is also about depopulation, and it's about control of every aspect of your life, down to how your home is micromanaged and where you can go and whether you can own anything. It's very, very serious, and it's had a very detrimental effect on America, and on the policies that are happening over there are happening over in Europe too. So this is a global action plan that's implemented locally, and it's all done on the back of what we're now quite confidently saying is a lie. So Nils-Axel Morner, thanks very much for being on Windows on the World, and we'll speak to you very soon.
Thank you.